You're watching the Wellness Hour, news that makes you healthier. I'm Randy Alvarez. Today's topic is nutrition and how to live your best life. With us, we've had him on the program before. He is a board-certified thoracic surgeon, heart surgeon, and he is known throughout the world. And his first book, The Gundry Evolution, sizzling hot, best-selling book. I read the book. It helped change my life. Today's talking about the evolution of that first book. So with us, we have Dr. Stephen Gundry. Dr. Gundry, welcome to the program.
Hey, thanks for having me back, Randy.
So for people that don't know you, you used to be a so-called, I'm calling a traditional thoracic surgeon. You did heart transplants on babies or on infants, things like that. So tell us a little bit about your bio and what led you into this way of treating patients today in Palm Springs, California. Is that correct? Is that where you're located?
Correct. Both Palm Springs and Santa Barbara. So yeah, I was chairman of heart surgery at Loma Linda University and did lots of the baby heart transplants and was very famous for operating on people who nobody else wanted to. And about 17 years ago, a gentleman by the name of Big Ed in the first book came in with what appeared to be inoperable coronary artery disease. But in 6 months' time, with a diet and taking a bunch of supplements from a health food store, he actually reversed most of the blockages in his coronary arteries. And I was so impressed with that as a researcher, I decided to revisit my thesis at Yale University in human evolutionary biology.
Now, by the way, Dr. Gundry, I met you about this time 17, 18 years ago, and you were a big, heavy guy also.
Yep. Yeah,
So
I weighed 70 pounds more than I do now. And I've been on every diet known to mankind, and I could lose 20 pounds and then gain 25 back. And I was running 30 miles a week. I was going to the gym 1 hour every day, and I was eating a healthy, low-fat, mostly vegetarian diet from Loma Linda. And I couldn't figure out why I had high blood pressure and high cholesterol and arthritis and prediabetes. So I got out my thesis from Yale on what we were designed to eat prior to agriculture. And I put myself on that program, and I started taking a bunch of supplements from the health food store. And I lost 50 pounds my first year, and I subsequently lost another 20 pounds. And I started teaching my patients that I operated on at Loma Linda this diet, and the same sort of things happened to them. And then in 2001, I made a leap of faith and said, you know, I can get rid of heart disease, I can get rid of diabetes by teaching people how to eat. So I resigned my position and came out to Palm Springs, and I set up an institute where I basically teach people how to eat to get rid of whatever they walk through the door with.
So Dr. Gundry, so you were seeing reversals in plaqued arteries?
Oh yeah, see it all the time. I've
Really?
I've published papers of 10,000 people with known coronary artery disease who have been followed for 12 years. And in those people, the incidence of a new event, a new stent, a new heart attack, a new bypass surgery, or death is only 2% over a 12-year period of time. Now, traditionally, in traditional medicine, we're excited that if they make it 3 years, only 50% of them have a new event. That's considered success. So we basically shown with angiograms, with stress tests, that you can reverse coronary artery disease with food.
What do your colleagues say about this? Other thoracic surgeons, cardiologists?
Well, Dr. Mehmet Oz and I are friends, and he's a big fan. In fact, I'm going to be taping Dr. Oz's show next week, which will air very shortly on the new book. So I have a number of cardiologists who actually see me in Palm Springs. And I have a number of cardiologists that will refer what appear to be hopeless cases to me. And so far, we haven't been disappointed.
And this book will help outline if somebody has a certain specific high calcium score or a carotid artery with calcium building up, that can actually dissolve and go away?
Yeah, it's really fascinating. And there's a number of success stories that we profile in the book. But I've evolved from just treating heart disease to half of my patients now have autoimmune diseases, things like MS, lupus, rheumatoid arthritis, Crohn's disease. And a huge number of my patients have advanced cancer that we've been able to actually regress, which is, I wouldn't have ever believed it, but it's all outlined in the book, how we do it.
Okay.
And it's something that people can do. It's a doable thing.
And and I like, for me, when I read your book, you addressed cravings, about wiping out cravings. But let's talk about the main healthy foods you talk about in your book.
Well, we were actually designed to eat leaves. We actually are evolved from a tree-dwelling ape, and we're actually designed to eat lots of healthy fats. One of my sayings now is the only purpose of food is to get olive oil into your mouth. There's really beautiful studies out of Spain putting people who are 65 years of age on either a high olive oil Mediterranean diet where they use a liter of olive oil per week. That's 12 tablespoons a day. And comparing that to a low-fat Mediterranean diet. And after the end of 5 years in this study, the olive oil group actually had preserved memory, and the low-fat diet group had diminished memory. But what's more interesting for your female viewers is that the female group with the olive oil had a 67% less incidence of breast cancer than the low-fat Mediterranean diet. I think if there was a drug that could do that, everybody would buy it, and all they got to do is go to their local store and get some good olive oil. They can go to Costco and get a great olive oil.
Now, what about those critics that may say, well, humans thrive more, brain works better on omega-3s, and omega-6 is what's in olive oil? So
olive oil is actually a monounsaturated fat. It's actually an omega-7 and 9. So olive oil doesn't have any omega-6s to speak of. There's a few, but not very many.
Okay.
Avocado oil is another great source. In the book, I talk about a new oil to us called perilla oil. It's actually the oil of Korea and much of China. And perilla oil has the highest amounts of short chain omega-3s of any oil, beats canola oil by far, and I'm a huge proponent of that.
What about fish oil, things like that? Because that's, that's omega-3. Are you okay with fish oil? Krill oil?
I love fish oil. I take a huge amount of fish oil, and one of the things that's fascinating is our brain is 70% fat. So if someone's in an argument and calls someone a fathead, I will back them up. It's absolutely true. Half of the fat in our brain is an omega-3 fat called DHA. And the only real source of DHA is from fish and fish oil. There is an algae-based DHA that I have my vegan patients take, but fish oil is the only way to get DHA into you for now. Cod liver oil also works. But here's the amazing thing. Studies have now shown that people who have the highest levels of omega-3 in their blood that we can measure, as they age, they have the biggest brains and the biggest areas of memory called the hippocampus, versus the people who have the lowest levels of omega-3. They have literally the most shrunken brains and the smallest areas of memory. So this stuff is brain fuel, and it is amazing the number of people who have low omega-3s in their blood. I measure it every 3 months in all my patients. It also correlates people with cancer in general have much lower omega-3 levels than people without cancer. So omega-3 is not only good for your brain, it's good for almost everything.
Now you're big because you titled your first book about, the Gundry evolution. Some of the things that I've interviewed Barry Sears, who wrote the Zone Diet, he believes that humans' brains developed the fastest, according to him, when they started eating a lot of fish.
That's correct.
Do you believe that too?
Yeah, that's very true. And believe it or not, the only large-brained animals in the world are actually fish and shellfish-eating animals, because the only way you can build a big brain is with omega-3 fats. And the fascinating thing, the mistake about the paleo diet, somehow they think that eating all these, buffalo and antelope made us big brain. But in fact, if that was true, then there ought to be big-brained animals out on the African plains, lions and tigers and hyenas. And in fact, they have small brains. In fact, great apes, while they have pretty doggone nice-sized brains, have brains nowhere near the size of humans. And that's because humans long ago began eating the omega-3 fats in a African catfish, which has huge amounts of omega-3, and also in shellfish on the shores of the Indian Ocean. So I completely agree with Barry Sears on this one.
Okay, good. Now, reading through your book, flipping through a little bit of it, lectins. You say to try to avoid lectins. What are they and what foods are they in?
Yeah, so lectins are the plant defense system. They're proteins that plants use not only in their leaves, but mostly in their seeds, which are their babies, to try and convince an animal that you shouldn't eat these babies. The lectins are concentrated primarily in the hulls of the seed. So, for instance, a lot of people have heard of gluten, and gluten is a lectin. But gluten is actually a minor lectin in the scheme of things. There's a far more important lectin in the whole grain of wheat that we have traditionally thrown away, called wheat germ agglutinin. And in the lab, one of the easiest ways to produce heart disease is to consume wheat germ, believe it or not.
Interesting.
The other best way to produce heart disease is the lectin in peanuts. Peanuts are actually not a nut, they're a bean, a legume, and the peanut lectin causes heart disease in rhesus monkeys if we give them peanut oil. But if we give them peanut oil where that lectin has been removed, then they don't get heart disease.
So,
and in the book,
let me cut in here. Let me cut in here for a moment, because so many people look at peanut butter as like a health food. They're eating it on celery and I mean, look, I'm in San Diego. One of my employees, they go, peanut butter?
Peanuts are an American plant. No human being from Europe, Asia, or Africa ever had a peanut until 500 years ago. 94% of human beings have a preformed antibody. That's something, an immune system that we react to the peanut lectin. Not only has it been shown to produce heart disease, but we can actually feed peanuts to men and then take their bowel movements and feed them to rats. Rats love poop. And the rats will develop colon cancer. And it's been shown that the lectin in peanuts actively stimulates colon cancer to grow. So this is a food that's not native to us. No American plant, like the nightshade family, like potatoes, eggplant, peppers, tomatoes, have lectins that we're not used to.
So are lectins, like, in a way, undigestible? Do they like gluten? They say sticks to the intestine. Do lectins do the same kind of thing?
Yeah, lectins are called sticky proteins because they stick to certain enterocytes in our intestines. They stick to mucus. Believe it or not, if you get a runny nose after you're eating, it's actually because the mucus is there to attract the lectins in the food you eat and actually trap them. We have some defenses against lectins, but that's one of the best examples. In fact, next time you eat some spicy food and your nose starts running, you should realize that, in fact, that's your response to the fact that you're eating lectins that you have no business eating.
Interesting. It's kind of a flushing out system.
Yeah.
Now, can you rattle off a few more popular foods that have these undigestible lectins? that cause heart disease,
yeah,
according to you?
yes. So beans are one of the big troublemakers in lectins. You cannot cook the lectins out of beans. You can diminish them by cooking and soaking, but they're not all gone. Amazingly, the Center for Disease Control believes that 20 to 30% of all food poisoning cases in the United States are caused by the lectins in undercooked beans. The most famous poison of all time, ricin, the white powder that we send to our elected official.
All right.
Ricin is the lectin of the castor bean, and one molecule of ricin will kill a human being.
So is this go for all beans, like garbanzo beans? I mean,
Oh,
if
yeah.
it has bean in it, don't eat it, you're saying?
So yeah, unless they're pressure cooked. And if you pressure cook beans, they're perfectly safe. In fact,
Oh, really?
pressure cooking will destroy all lectins except the gluten molecule. Pressure cooking cannot destroy gluten. So that means if you want some tomato sauce, pressure cook it. If you want some beans, pressure cook them. And I give a lot
tomato
of
sauce
examples.
has lectins?
Pardon?
Tomatoes have lectins?
Oh, yeah. The skin and the seeds have lectins. And traditionally, the Italians have always peeled and de-seeded their tomatoes before they make sauce. Interestingly enough, you will never open a glass jar of Italian bell peppers and see peels and seeds because they're gone. They've been removed. Here's something the Southwest American Indians always char and peel the peppers and then de-seed them before they eat them or grind them into chili powder. You'll never open a can of green chilies and see peels and seeds because they've been removed, because traditional cultures have realized that these are the troublemakers.
With lectins,
Yeah.
you get rid of lectins, you lower your chance of getting heart disease. Is that correct? And
That's correct.
Because you imply in your book that, or not even imply, but that I guess you could build up like a toxic level from a cumulative eating habits of lectins. So
Correct.
if that's the case, where does it build up and how do you detox from it? Or can you?
Well, that's what was so exciting when I first met this gentleman, Big Ed, who had cleaned out his coronary arteries by returning to a diet that almost all humans ate prior to agriculture. And there's some fascinating studies of people around the world who don't eat major lectin-containing foods, and they, in fact, don't have heart disease. They don't have arthritis. They don't have the typical things that we associate with aging, and it's simply because they don't have lectins in their diet. And again, I've published papers on over 1,200 people with known active heart disease who have now gone 12 years without new events, and that's shocking in terms of conventional medicine. But in fact, if you remove lectins, the body has an innate ability to repair itself. And this is something that actually Hippocrates taught many thousand years ago, the father of medicine. Hippocrates believed that the purpose of a physician was to identify the external forces that were keeping the patient from healing it himself. It was called the green life force. And the physician should identify those things and then remove those, and then the patient would heal himself. And as long as I've been doing this now, Hippocrates was absolutely right. And lectins are one of the main things that keep us from having optimum health.
I do a lot of reading, hear a lot about gluten. Everybody's afraid of gluten. Not a lot. I mean, there are people talking about lectins, but it sounds like not in the way that you are. So you got to get rid of lectins in your diet. Then do you do before and afters? That means you do heart imaging like EBT or some sort of a scan that shows, okay, here's a arteries filled with
Yeah, we have coronary angiograms of people before and after, and there's a dramatic regression of plaque. We also have stress tests of someone who's been on the program, which were wildly positive and then become negative. I have a number of examples in the book of people who I literally had in the pre-op holding room ready to go for an urgent coronary bypass, who were scared or said, I just can't do this. Is there some other way? and I would tell them about my program, and they'll say, look, I'll be your best patient, just don't cut me open. In fact, one of them I saw just last week, a terrible diabetic woman who's a farmer up in the Yucca Valley in California. And she went on my program after we canceled her surgery. And she's now 3.5 years out. She doesn't have any diabetes anymore. She carries 50-pound bags of, hay and bales of hay and shovels manure. And her stress tests are absolutely normal. And we've done nothing except to teach her how to eat.
Now you believe, according to your book, that you can change somebody's health in just 90 days. Like a complete transformation. Really?
Yep. We recycle, change about 90% of all the cells in our body every 90 days, every 3 months. And we replace the old cell with a new cell, with actually a stem cell. And the premise is that since we're always in this constant renewal, if we give these new cells high quality ingredients, and we don't damage these new cells with the cumulative effect of lectins, that within 90 days, you'll see an amazing transformation in most people. And I would not have believed this. I came from conventional medicine. I still practice medicine. I still take Medi-Cal and Medicaid patients because I really want everyone to have the right for vibrant health. And it's amazing to see the transformations in people who follow this program.
So you call it, is that correct, the paradox eating plan. How is it different? Because it sounds a lot to me like paleo. You're not supposed to eat lectins, things like that, or some of these other popular diets.
So here's the problem. The paleo folks seem to think that a tomato is a healthy thing, even though we all never ate a tomato until 500 years ago because a tomato is an American plant. And so some of the things in the paleo diet are absolutely not paleo. The other thing that the paleo folks don't get is that we did not become a great human species by running around and killing mastodons. Most of what made a human is what we talked about before. We ate fish and shellfish and tubers and leaves. And that's actually what made us human. And as I show in the book, eating meats, particularly beef, pork, and lamb, is one of the best ways that I've found to produce cancer and heart disease because of a sugar molecule that's got a fancy name called Nu-5GC. And we produce antibodies to Nu-5GC because we make a sugar molecule called Nu-5AC that we confuse with this other sugar molecule and we attack ourselves. It's called autoimmunity. And there's very good data that the reason, quote, red meat causes heart disease is because of the sugar molecule.
Now what about like organic grass-fed beef? We're not grain finished, but all they spent their whole life eating what they were supposed to eat, and they say that there's omega-3s in there. It's a great ratio, omega-3, omega-6. What are your thoughts on that?
That's a good start. But the problem is, if you look at the blue zones, those people who have incredible longevity compared to the general population, the real factor that separates the blue zones from any other diet is that they eat very, very little animal protein. And even a fish and a chicken is an animal. And as I show in the book, you can actually show measurements of longevity called insulin-like growth factor. And the only way to lower insulin-like growth factor, which is what you want to do if you want good health long-term, is to limit animal protein and to limit sugars, and that includes fruit. And one of the most controversial parts of my book is that I tell people that fruit is candy and should be severely limited if you want to lose weight or if you want to live a long time.
So fruit's not a good thing because they always pair fruits and vegetables. Eat your fruits and vegetables, eat your vegetables and fruits. So just eliminate the fruit part.
There's actually been studies that show that very thing, what they've done is taken two groups of people, and one group ate lots of fruits and not much vegetables, and the other group ate lots of vegetables and not much fruit. The group that ate the fruit actually had a very high incidence of diabetes, and the group that ate the vegetables had a very low incidence of diabetes. The other thing that's important for people to realize is that if it has a seed, it's not a vegetable, it's a fruit. So a tomato is a fruit, a pepper is a fruit, a zucchini is a fruit, a cucumber is a fruit. And it was fascinating to me early on in my career in doing this that I would take cucumbers away from women who wanted to lose weight. And not only did they lose weight, but their cholesterol dropped dramatically.
Because cucumbers have lectins.
Cucumbers not only have lectins, but they're a fruit and they're pure sugar. And if you remember from the first book, it's the exposure to fruit sugar that actually tells us that it's summer and that winter is on the way and that we should be storing fat for the winter. One of the amazing things that people don't know is that great apes, gorillas, chimps, orangutans only gain weight during fruit season. And fruit season only happens once a year, even in the jungle. And so all of us are programmed to go after fruit whenever possible because our brain can't imagine that a 747 can bring blueberries to Costco in February from Chile. And so if we're eating fruit, it must be summer and we should be gaining weight for the winter. And we're programmed to look for fruit. But now we have fruit season 365 days a year.
Okay, good. Now, we're short on time, and I have to ask you about the nutrients and supplements outlined in the book that will help you along the way. But what about cravings? Look, I'm going to, as a person that's been in and out of great shape, battling weight my whole life, I feel like I finally have it under control. I'm eating like this. But the question is, most people know, or let's say overweight people, right, eat, lean fish or protein and vegetables, but good luck, you can't do it because of the cravings. So what's the answer? Will your cravings go away when you eat like this?
Yeah, and it takes about 2 weeks for this to go away. Many people have a hormone that's high in their blood called leptin, and they're leptin resistant. That sounds like lectin, but it's not. And when I measure leptin levels in many people, they're elevated, and it literally tells your brain that you're starving to death and you're not full and you ought to go get some more food. And it takes about 2 weeks to overcome this. I've found that many people, if they add some coconut oil to their diet, or my preference, MCT oil, which is medium chain triglycerides, sometimes called liquid coconut oil, that it'll really, if they take a tablespoon a couple times a day, it'll really cut the cravings because it actually gives a fuel to your brain, and your brain says, oh, it's okay, I've got plenty to eat, I don't have to go looking for something else.
So the MCT oil, which is a coconut oil, and I've been on it about 5 months, it's helped wipe out my cravings, but I haven't checked to see if it throws me into ketosis. Are you finding that it can take somebody and put them into ketosis, which is a way of burning fat for fuel?
Well, yeah.
I wanted to ask you about that.
Yeah, this is a big misnomer. So you can eat ketones, and coconut oil is 65% ketones, MCT oil is 100% ketones, and we can measure ketones in your blood. But that doesn't mean that you're in ketosis. What I want is for you and I to burn our own fat for fuel and get ourselves into ketosis. So just because you're eating coconut oil and somebody measures your ketones in your blood and say, oh, you're in ketosis, doesn't mean that you're in ketosis at all. The other thing the paleo guys and the keto guys don't get is that protein stops ketosis, because we don't store protein and we don't waste energy. So we convert protein into sugar because we can turn sugar into fat. And so many of my patients who follow a ketogenic diet or an Atkins diet are never in ketosis because of all the protein they're eating. And so when I take protein away from them and just have them eat primarily fats, that's when they finally go into ketosis. So one of the biggest mistakes people on a ketogenic diet make is they're eating far too much protein.
Okay, so the MCT oil is somewhat of a fake ketosis. What you're showing
It is, yeah, but it will keep your brain happy as you're beginning to cut back on, on foods.
All right, and I know this is a big topic. We talked about lectins, we talked about these kind of things, and this is a big topic as outlined in your book. But so what are the nutrients, and supplements to make this all put it all together?
So one of the things that I have done over the last 17 years is measure the effect of supplements, primarily called polyphenols and fish oil, on the flexibility of people's blood vessels and also on the stickiness on the inside of their blood vessels. And these can be done with laboratory tests or with machines that many doctors can get for their office. And what I found was that polyphenols actually make you dilate your blood vessels and stop the stickiness. And if we take polyphenols away, the blood vessels will stiffen and the stickiness will return. So last fall,
by the way, for people that aren't as sophisticated as you are, polyphenols are found in plants. These are like phytonutrients, chemicals in plants.
Right, they're phytonutrients that plants, primarily things that are dark in color, have high amounts of polyphenols. They're in the skins of berries. They're in red wine, for instance, resveratrol. They're in coffee.
Okay.
They're in dark chocolate, greater than 72% dark chocolate. They're in olives, for instance. They're even in olive oil.
What about coffee? Coffee? Good coffee?
Coffee's great for you. It's, believe it or not, there's beautiful studies that show that people who drink 5 or more cups of coffee a day have a very low incidence of Alzheimer's and Parkinson's compared to people who drink less. And it's because of the polyphenols. So in the book, I show what supplements that people should get. I have my own line at Gundry MD, but the book actually shows you, if you don't want to get my supplements, here's where to go. And you can go to Costco, or you can go to Trader Joe's, or you can go to Vitacost, or you can go to Amazon. So I have an array that I call the G6 of the most important supplements.
Okay. But by the way, on these phytonutrients, when I last interviewed you a while ago, you said that these powders, like a green drink powder, is great, or almost as good as like having a bunch of broccoli or having crushed broccoli. How could that be? How could this powder stay 30 days, 60 days, 90 days in your shelf and not go bad? That's the part I can't seem to get.
Well, again, these are actual chemicals. They're not the living part of the plant, but these are phytochemicals that are capable of being preserved. But your viewers need to know that most green powders contain some really nasty lectins in wheatgrass and barley grass, and a lot of them have tomato powder in them. Oh. So I actually designed my own green powder called Primal Plants that eliminated those, because I couldn't find one on the market that didn't have these nasty lectins in them. So, plant phytochemicals, polyphenols, are storageable. We've actually shown that they're still active sitting in our proprietary jar for 6 months after we package them. And we actually have to prove to the FDA that some of our ingredients are active after 6 months, because people are going to, buy several containers and store them. And so we go through a rigorous process to prove that these active ingredients are actually there.
What about red drinks? Because some of the great stuff, but it's like sugary.
Well, yeah, and that's why I invented Vital Reds, which is my most popular supplement. Vital Reds is basically pure polyphenols, along with the only proven probiotic that actually gets into the gut. It's a spore called BC30. Most probiotics are pretty worthless. They're destroyed by stomach acid. BC30 is one of the only few that gets into the gut. So, a red powder should have large amounts of polyphenols. And that's actually why I invented Vital Reds, because I wanted to have people get the polyphenol benefit of fruit, but without all the sugar that accompanies fruit.
Okay, who should read your book? Like, when you wrote your book, in your mind, who do you want to really take advantage of this book? Is it for the more sophisticated? Is it for the person trying to reverse heart disease? Is it for the person trying to prevent heart disease? What is it? or just
all of the above. It's written in a conversational style. I have a huge number of references to back up what I say, but it's written as if you walked into my office and I started chatting with you. I have a number of patients who are Hispanic, who speak only Spanish, and a lot of examples in the book how they've been able to do this without speaking or understanding a word that I said. This is something that's doable with a high school education or with a PhD or MD. The principles apply to everybody, and the longer I've been doing this, the more I realize that almost all of our health issues stem from eating lectins, and also on some of the what I call the 7 deadly disruptors that have totally destroyed our microbiome, the gut bugs that have kept us healthy for millions of years.
So lectins, would you put lectins as more dangerous than gluten?
Yeah, gluten is actually a minor lectin. You know, what we forget is that there are societies that have been eating gluten as their preferred protein for a very long time. Indonesia uses a pure gluten called seitan or seitan as their meat of choice, and they don't have the issues. Remember that the French eat white bread and white baguettes. The Italians
Yeah, but
eat
I'm always told that they're preparing it differently.
Yeah, well, they're been getting rid of the major lectins, which are in the hull. That's why most cultures eat white bread and white pasta. The idea of an Italian eating whole wheat pasta is just so crazy, I still can't get around it. I mean, look at it this way. 4 billion people use rice as their staple, yet 4 billion people go to the trouble of taking the hull off of rice and eating it white, even though everybody knows how good brown rice is for you, because the lectins are in the hulls of grains, and cultures have been throwing the hull away until we started this craziness of whole grain goodness. And it's really been in the last 50 years where we've been pushed to eat whole grains that we've seen our health deteriorate, because the whole grain has most of the lectins.
So the 7 grain, 10 grain, the more the grains, that you want to run from those.
Absolutely. In fact, in the book, there's a lady who started eating Dave's Killer Bread, and her autoimmune disease went wild, and I couldn't think of a better thing to name a bread as Dave's Killer Bread, and because it's a killer.
You like brown rice over white rice, but then some people say, "Oh,
I like white rice."
You like white rice?
Yeah.
Then there's arsenic supposedly in brown rice.
Yeah, and I don't want people to eat rice anyhow, but if they're going to eat rice, get white basmati rice from India. Believe it or not, our basmati rice is a different strain.
You mentioned good fats, right? And we skipped this one, and I'm curious what your thoughts are. Ghee butter, like this special butter.
Yeah, so ghee has had the casein removed, and casein is casein A1 is a protein that I talk about in the book that's actually a major lectin-like protein. So if you're going to use butter, you should use ghee, or use butter from France or Italy or from goats and sheep, because they don't contain the casein A1. But in general, I'd much prefer people use more healthy fats like avocado or avocado oil or olive oil. And macadamia nut oil is spectacular. And then there's a fat that I introduce people to called perilla oil, the fat of Korea and much of China, which is amazing stuff as well.
In your book, it's all laid out for you, recipes, what supplements to take, foods to avoid, and it's as much of a weight loss book as it is a prevention book. Because I guess when you eat like this, everything gets better. Blood pressure goes down. Your memory gets better. I mean, now vitamin D? You haven't talked about vitamin D. People are all hyped up about vitamin D. So here's
the deal with vitamin D. Most Americans are deficient in vitamin D. 80% of Southern Californians are deficient in vitamin D. There is, quite frankly, no such thing as vitamin D toxicity. Dr. Hollick from Boston University, who's the world expert on vitamin D, has only seen it once in his career, and that was in a doctor who mistakenly was taking 1 million international units a day for 6 months. I personally run my vitamin D level greater than 120 nanograms per milliliter. I think anybody with
So how
cancer.
much are you taking to get that?
So I take, for instance, I take 5,000 international units a day, but I have many people with autoimmune disease that will use 20,000, 30,000, 40,000 international units a day to get their levels up to 100. And here's a shocker. If I feel like I'm getting a cold or a bug, I'll take 150,000 international units of vitamin D 3 days in a row, as well as 8,000 milligrams of vitamin C 3 days in a row, and it knocks it right out. Vitamin D is an amazing antiviral compound. It's also anti-cancer, and your brain needs it to work.
Now, what about the sun? Do you have to have a little bit of sun combined with vitamin D? I read an article about this, that you got to do a little bit of both.
It's really, really, really hard to get enough vitamin D from sunlight. And I've had people who come in with deep tans, and their vitamin D is less than 20. So sunlight's not going to do it.
Okay, so it's all in your book.
Yeah.
Final message. Final message is somebody that has been diagnosed. Maybe they were told you need a stent, you need bypass, or you're going to die. What do you say to them? It's early stage for them.
Yeah, it's funny. I now have people 12 years later who were told that, and I took them on, and they took me on, and they still walk into my office every day, and they're clearly not dead. This is not for everybody. You have to realize that you should listen to your cardiologist or your heart surgeon, but there are many people who don't realize that if I put a stent in you, the rest of your blood vessels are full of crud. And it's just a matter of time, unless you change what you do, that the next stent will go in, or the next bypass will go in, or a stroke will happen.
Now, before you reached enlightenment, I'm going to call it, 20 years ago, 19 years ago, on my show, you said that a bypass was like building a bridge over troubled waters. Has your philosophy has completely changed since then?
So what I want to do is swallow the equivalent of Drano and clean out our clogged pipes naturally with food and supplements. Wow,
that's good. Dr. Gundry, always a pleasure to have you on the show. Good stuff. And where do they get your book, and how soon could they get the book? What are some of the best places?
They can pre-order on Amazon or Barnes & Noble right now. Actually, it's an amazing price on both sites. It'll be in bookstores on April 25th, The Plant Paradox.
Okay. Now, what about an audiobook? Are you going to do that, I hope?
Yeah. There's an audiobook. It's on Kindle. The audiobook will be available on April 25th as well.
Okay.
Yep.
Great, Dr. Gundry. Thank you so much for coming on the program.
Always a pleasure to see you, Randy, and good luck with your show.
You've been watching The Wellness Hour. I'm Randy Alvarez. For now, I wish you good health.